like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Imagine you're on death row, just waiting, and suddenly, boom, the president commutes your sentence.
Wow.
That's exactly what happened to 37 federal death row inmates.
Really?
This month, actually, thanks to President Biden. We're diving into this whole thing.
Okay.
It's a Fox News article, and it gets into what this decision means,
I'm all ears.
Not just for these 37 people, but for Biden, for his legacy, for the death penalty debate in America, like the whole thing.
What strikes me right away is the timing.
Yeah.
It's December 2024, right?
Yeah.
The last month of Biden's presidency.
Yeah.
Right before Trump takes over.
So Biden commutes these sentences, meaning they'll serve life without parole, no execution.
Right.
But there's a catch.
Oh, I bet there is.
3 big names are still on death row. Robert Bowers,
The synagogue shooter.
Dylan Roof,
Charleston.
and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev.
The Boston Marathon bomber.
Wow. And it's not random, right? The article makes it clear. Biden supports the death penalty, but only for, and I'm quoting here, terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder.
Interesting. So he's basically saying these executions won't happen on my watch. But who knows what'll happen when Trump's in charge.
Seems like a strategic move, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it fits with what we've seen from Biden this whole time. Remember, he put a hold on federal executions way back when he started.
Right.
This is kind of like the peak of that, him being against the death penalty.
The article calls it a record-breaking use of Clemency Powers, which sounds pretty huge.
Oh, it's massive.
So there's 2 main ways clemency works. Pardons.
Which completely wiped the slate clean.
Commutations, which is what this is, right?
Exactly. It lessens the sentence.
Biden's done a ton of both these things during his time, but this is in a whole other category. It's historic.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Now, the article goes into who these 37 people actually are and their stories. Man, some are intense.
I know, right? We're talking all sorts of crimes.
It's a really mixed bag, which is important to keep in mind as we go through this.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking drug offenses, murders in prison, kidnapping, people escaping prison, the whole gamut.
It's wild. Like, take Marcevici Barnett,
Oh, yeah.
convicted of killing a guy during a carjacking, and his ex-girlfriend. 2 separate murders.
It's a lot to unpack. Like, clemency doesn't erase what he did, obviously.
Right.
But it makes you think, what's the point of punishment,
Is it about revenge, rehab, something else entirely? Big questions.
Then there's Brandon Basham and Chadrick Folks. They escaped prison. Then when kidnapped and killed a woman, they were already in prison for serious stuff.
It makes you wonder, should people who commit crimes after escaping even be eligible for clemency?
It's a tough one.
That's the thing about recidivism, right? Are some people just too dangerous to ever let out, no matter what?
Yeah.
And how do you balance that with the idea of second chances? It's complicated.
Then there's Len Davis, not just any criminal, a cop. He ordered a hit on a witness who was investigating him.
Talk about a violation of trust.
Right, it's a whole other set of issues. When someone in power, someone who's supposed to uphold the law, does something like that, how do we even process that?
It makes you question everything. Does their past make them more deserving of mercy? Less deserving? There's no easy answer.
Definitely a lot of gray area here.
This is exactly why this mass commutation is so fascinating. It makes you think that you're, beyond just guilt or innocence. What is justice, really?
Yeah.
What is the point of mercy?
Big questions.
And then there's Kaboni Savage. This guy was a drug kingpin linked to 12 murders, including that arson attack that killed 6 people from a federal informant's family.
Awful.
It's going to be a controversial one, that's for sure, because it forces us to think about whether even the worst criminals deserve a shot at mercy. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Then there's Richard Tipton and James Roane Jr. They were in the same gang as Corey Johnson, and he was actually executed in 2021 under Biden. All 3 involved in a prison murder, but 2 got clemency, 1 didn't. Doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, it really highlights how subjective these decisions are. I mean, there are rules, but ultimately, the president has a lot of power here, and it can lead to these inconsistencies.
It's that constant struggle between holding people accountable and showing compassion. Like, yeah, these people did terrible things, but can people change? Does the chance of redemption outweigh the need for punishment?
That's the heart of the whole clemency debate, isn't it? And it's not simple. Every single case is different, and it makes you examine your own beliefs about justice and forgiveness.
So we've got these drug-related crimes, prison murders, but the article also talks about murders that happened on federal land. Edward Fields, who killed those campers. Marvin Gabriel and Richard Jackson both killed women.
Right, so many different situations.
It just shows you this clemency grant, it covers a huge range of offenses.
And they all come with their own legal and moral baggage, right?
Exactly. But we've got to zoom out a little, you know. It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh, we are. There's a lot more to unpack. But before we do, I want you to think about something. What stands out to you about these cases? Any patterns? Questions?
It's easy to get lost in the details, for sure. Taking a step back is important.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll do in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to look at how this decision is landing, who's supporting it, who's criticizing it, and what does it all mean for the future of the death penalty in America. All right, welcome back. So we left off talking about these huge implications of Biden's clemency grants, right? But let's actually focus on the people directly affected by this.
It's hard to know where to start. Some of these stories, these cases, man.
I hear you. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we could start with the common threads, like 7 of these guys were convicted of drug crimes.
Okay.
Their stories give us a glimpse into how devastating the drug trade can be, the ripple effects on entire communities.
Makes sense. Like, what about Julius Robinson? He killed 2 people over a drug dispute.
Exactly. His case, and others like it, force us to think about the bigger picture. Was this violence fueled by desperation, addiction? And how much does that play into the decision for clemency?
It's complicated. Then you have Ricardo Sanchez Jr. and Daniel Troya. They murdered a whole family, 2 little kids, because of a drug debt. Heartbreaking.
That case is especially tough, right? Because of the sheer brutality of the innocent victims. Can clemency ever be justified when the victims' families are hurting so much?
It's hard to even imagine their pain. What do they think about all this, about Biden commuting the sentences of the people who did this to their loved ones?
That's a perspective we can't ignore. The article focuses on the inmates, sure, but every crime leaves behind a trail of pain, so much trauma, loss.
The article also talks about all these murders that happen inside prisons. It's like, if you're already locked up, how do things get that bad?
It makes you think about the prison system itself, right? What kind of conditions are we talking about? Do these places actually help people rehabilitate? Or do they make things worse?
Right.
Like Richard Tipton and James Rohn Jr., they were in the same gang as Corey Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And he was executed in 2021 under Biden. All 3 involved in a prison murder, but 2 got clemency. Why?
That's what I don't get. It just seems so arbitrary. Like, why them and not him?
It shows you how much personal judgment is involved. There are guidelines, of course, but the president has a lot of power to decide who gets a second chance. And that can lead to outcomes that are hard to understand.
Yeah, it feels like we're always searching for that balance, you know? Accountability versus compassion. These people did terrible things, no doubt, but is there a chance they can change? Is that possibility more important than punishing them?
That's the million-dollar question when it comes to clemency, isn't it? There's no easy answer. Every case has its own wrinkles, its own story, and it forces you to confront your own ideas about justice, about forgiveness.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about Kaboni Savage. This guy was a straight-up drug lord. 12 murders, that arson attack, 6 people dead. Hard to believe someone like that would get clemency.
No doubt his case is going to cause a lot of controversy because it brings up this idea. Even the worst of the worst, are they capable of mercy?
It makes you wonder, is there a limit? Are some crimes so bad that clemency is off the table, period?
That's a question people have been asking for centuries, right? And there's no single answer that fits every situation. But cases like Savage's, they force us into these uncomfortable gray areas where the law clashes with our morals.
Right. So we've got these drug crimes, these prison murders, but then there are the murders that happen on federal land. Edward Fields killing those campers, Marvin Gabriel, Richard Jackson, both killed women, all different circumstances.
It's a good reminder that violence can happen anywhere, even in places you think are safe. And these cases often involve different layers of law enforcement. You've got federal authorities taking over the investigations, the prosecutions. It gets complex.
It shows you just how much this clemency grant covers. It's not just one type of crime.
Exactly. And while we can't get into every single case, the point is these individuals, their crimes, it's all diverse. And that adds another layer to this already complex story.
We're barely scratching the surface, aren't we?
You got it. There's so much more to say. But before we move on, I want you to think about something. What jumps out at you about these cases? Any patterns you're noticing? Any questions popping up?
It's easy to get lost in the details, you're right. Stepping back and looking at the bigger picture is important.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we'll do next. We'll look at the reactions to this decision, who's on board, who's pushing back, and what does it all mean for the future of capital punishment in this country.
Okay, we've looked at some individual stories, some really heavy stuff, but let's zoom out a bit. How's this whole thing being received? I mean, we're talking about commuting sentences for convicted murderers here. Got to be some strong opinions out there, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The article talks about both the support and the pushback, and you can probably guess where each side is coming from.
Yeah, I'm guessing those who are pro-death penalty aren't too happy about this.
You got it. But what's interesting is who is supporting it. It's not just the typical anti-death penalty folks. You've got former corrections officials weighing in, too. The article even quotes Justin Jones.
Who's that?
He used to be the director of the Oklahoma Department of Corrections.
Okay.
What's his take?
He's saying this move by Biden, it'll actually make prisons safer for staff. He says executions are a huge drain on resources, and they expose staff to a lot of trauma.
Yeah, I could see that.
Think about it. You're asking these people to take part in taking a life. That's a heavy thing to carry around.
I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah.
You're basically asking them to be executioners.
Exactly. And Jones is arguing that by taking the death penalty off the table, you create a more humane environment. For everyone involved, really.
So it's not just the moral arguments against capital punishment, but also the practical side of things. Right on. And this brings up an interesting point. Does the impact on the people who carry out executions, does that factor into your own view on the death penalty?
It's definitely food for thought. The article also mentioned that this isn't the first time Biden's been criticized for how he uses clemency.
Right. Remember all the backlash when he commuted those sentences for prisoners in home confinement during COVID?
Yeah.
And then there was the pardon of his son, Hunter. That was a whole political firestorm.
Definitely raised some eyebrows. Do you think those past decisions affect how people are reacting to this one?
I think it's hard to separate them, honestly.
Yeah.
Critics might see this as part of a bigger picture, a pattern of being too lenient.
And they might wonder if these decisions are really about each individual case or if there's some political maneuvering going on.
Exactly. And it's important to acknowledge that perspective, whether you agree with Biden or not. There's no denying that politics plays a role in how people see clemency.
There was something else in the article that surprised me. Apparently, a group of former corrections officials, 28 of them, they sent a letter to Biden.
Oh, yeah.
Urging him to commute all the death sentences, not just these 37.
Wow. It's a pretty big statement, right? It suggests that even among the people who are tasked with carrying out executions, there's a growing unease with the death penalty itself.
It lends credence to the argument that the system itself is messed up, regardless of how you feel about capital punishment in general.
It really gives you a glimpse into how complex this issue is. You have people who have devoted their careers to upholding the law, but they're also seeing firsthand the moral and practical challenges that come with the death penalty.
It makes you wonder if we're seeing a change in attitudes, even among those who were once responsible for carrying out executions.
It's definitely something to watch. So let's step back even further. Historical context. How does Biden's use of clemency stack up against other presidents?
Well, the article says Biden's issued more sentence commutations at this point in his presidency than any recent president. And it's not even close. It says he's pardoned 65 people and commuted the sentences of 1,634 inmates as of December 13th.
Those are some serious numbers. It shows you he's making a conscious effort to use his power to change the criminal justice system. He's sending a message, and people who want reform are definitely hearing it.
But will it last? Will this impact future presidents? Could it lead to fewer death sentences nationwide?
Those are the big questions, right? Hard to say for sure, but I think Biden's actions are going to have an effect. There will be ripples.
Maybe it'll give other leaders the courage to do the same, or spark more open conversations about the death penalty and what the alternatives are.
That's the hope. And remember, you listening out there, you have a part to play in this too. Talking about it, learning about it, speaking up for what you believe in. That's how we change things.
So we've taken a deep dive here into presidential clemency and the death penalty. And one thing's for sure, there are no easy answers.
Nope. We've wrestled with legal arguments, ethical dilemmas, personal stories. We've seen the human side of these statistics, and we've felt the weight of these decisions.
And it leaves you with a lot to ponder. Like, what does justice really mean in a society that's struggling with crime, punishment, and second chances?
That's the question, isn't it? And we all have to find our own answers. Hopefully this deep dive has given you the information, the different viewpoints you need to start forming your own opinions on this really complex issue.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just some abstract legal debate. These are decisions that have real-world impact on people, families, entire communities.
So as you go about your day, we encourage you to keep exploring these issues, to dig deeper into the cases we talked about, to stay informed about the death penalty debate in America.
Because at the end of the day, it's up to all of us to have these conversations, to challenge our own beliefs, and to work towards a more just and fair world.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Whose voices are being heard? Whose stories are being told? And whose lives do we value? These are the questions we all need to consider as we grapple with the complexities of justice in our society.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're bubbly,